Yeah, I think we can probably start by going through the agenda. So our joint statement from last time, I think, and Lindsay double check me, but I tried to list all the topics that we still have outstanding. I think a couple of them are going to be pretty quick to go through. So if our last joint statement, which was the May 26th statement, has a couple things. Number one, reviewing the practice for logging parent contact hours. Reviewing draft P&A language regarding personal leave on Super Bowl Monday, which I have that done and ready for the team to look at. I wrote it 2 different ways, so we can look at either way, see what we like. Review the P&A to see if there's any language that has sunsetted. We know the early resignation language has, and see if there's anything else we need to look at. Finish up the IBB process on the grievance procedure. Share an update on the issue of PLCs, I think, is that right? Okay, and then obviously our compensation subgroups, and Russ can present information from the board meeting on Friday, where the board considered the updated May 26th guidance from the Department of Education on allowable uses of ESSER funds to include premium payments made pursuant to a program. So I don't know what makes sense order-wise, but those are the topics.
Bill, if you could just back up real quick, what was the very first one?
Practice.
Yes, what, say that?
Practice for logging parent contact hours.
Is that just a side issue, or is there an issue statement on that?
We do not have an issue statement on it. It's
Okay.
a question that arose due to differences in building practices that we were addressing in this setting.
Okay, got you, okay. And then you said the Super Bowl language, and then what was number 3?
Review any language in the P&A that has sunsetted, like early resignation.
Okay, and then you've got the work on the IB being out salary was number 4.
Yes.
The work you were doing on salaries for. And then 5, I think you just said other language to update.
No.
Is that different?
The only other thing I have is the finishing the IBB process on the grievance procedure.
And
update on
is that separate than ESSER funds?
Yes, that is separate. So
Okay, all right.
ESSER
You
funds
just-
would be part of our compensation discussion, I believe.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, you just rolled a little too fast for me this morning. What do you guys think? Jill, welcome. Whatever you guys want to take on first.
I kind of like doing our quick checkoffs, like in the morning as we get started. It makes me feel like we've accomplished a lot. And maybe, is there a possibility Jay's going to be able to join us later, or is it like he might, because
He's on his way back.
okay, I don't want to like if there's a possibility he can get here, we could save maybe like the more meaty discussions for later. If it's like he doesn't know, then, you know, we don't have to give consideration to that.
I think,
Okay,
because I thought originally his plan was this afternoon he would be here.
like maybe post lunch. Okay, so maybe we should try and save compensation till then and do some of these checkoff things like parent contact hours. Like maybe we can kind of go in order of the joint statement. Parent contact hours, P&A language on personal leave on Super Bowl Monday, review any language that has sunsetted, PLCs, and just kind of go through those, which aren't really issue statements, but things that we need. Well, the Super Bowl Monday is, but.
I'll be
Now,
glad to
do you
start off with
want
the.
to go ahead and set break and lunchtime now so people know what they're looking forward to in terms of stepping away for a moment? Or at least lunchtime?
You want to just say noon, break by noon?
Yeah, noon's great.
Okay.
Okay.
So I know Joe has done his homework on this issue of logging parent contact hours, so if we want, he can dive into that.
I'm going to need a little help from Abby on this. If you could pull up the paperwork that you sent me, the statement.
Oh,
Because that was what we agreed to. I met with Linda and Jay the week before last and kind of read through those minutes, and basically it does come down to PD beginning after, was it June 8th, I believe, and that was 7.5 hours for the first professional development date to be off, and then a total of 15, but if they got that total of 15 before August 1st, good for them, then they've got both of those days off for the year. When it comes to conferences, those days would begin being logged on the first day of school, and at that point in time, if they needed to get 7.5 hours before the first flex day, which I believe is that Thanksgiving week, if they received those 7.5 hour days at that time, then they would have that one. But if they logged 15 before that time, they were set for the next flex day. The discussion came up about the importance of continuing to log, and I'd like to say it's an expectation that teachers would, because it helps protect them as well as the administration when parents call and say that a teacher has not reached out, or the administration or nobody from the school has reached out. It gives us some leverage to say, here's the dates, here's the times we talk to you, and we're good to go. So when she finds the wording on it, I did share that wording with you and Jay a couple weeks ago.
And I'm sure you said 7.5 because that's secondary, but elementary is Jay, or John, how many?
That's
7?
why I needed the minutes.
Yeah.
It's minutes.
7 and 20 or 7 and 10? 7 and 10.
7 and 10. Yeah. I just put it in the chat.
And then the conferences, the first day back, teachers are back, I guess you could start. I'm just thinking there might be some people that reach out to parents before kids actually even show up, if there's, or do you want to wait till kids are actually in the building? I don't think a lot of people do that, but if you have, you know, sometimes parents will reach out to you saying, my student has this health concern, or that my student is transferring, would, you know, love to meet with you or whatever. Not a big deal, but I was just wondering what your thought was. I don't care a
Kind of
whole
makes
lot.
more sense to me to have it wait until the kids are here, but I don't know.
It seems that way a little bit more to be able to actually talk about progress or challenges that the student is having in class. I get that there are. And there's also some things in the summertime, and I think Abby made reference to her teachers reaching out in the summertime about some of those. But I think it gets a little bit gray during that time, but especially when the principal hasn't even sent out the Google log.
Well, I would think it wouldn't be till you have your class lists anyways, but I also know there are certain groups of teachers that don't have very many kids. For example, Lindsay, whom that might make more sense that they do make connections when things start, or you might have returning kids, so you still have those relationships. I don't think that's going to be your secondary teachers. We tend to get our rosters like the day before kids show up. So, but like I say, I don't think it's a huge thing. I just brought it up. But I think I know there have been principals that like a few days before school to have teachers go into neighborhood places, and it kind of fits with the spirit, but
Outside of contract hours?
yeah.
I wasn't aware of that, but
We talked a little bit about that. I talked a little bit about that with a few of my staff, because we do a couple of summer events outside of contract time, and we just said that maybe that could count as like one of the 5 required events. If it's a school-sponsored event outside of contract, that could be one of your 9 events.
Like I say, it doesn't affect me. I don't see my kids before, even know who they are before then, but just keep it in the spirit of communication.
And so both would roll over then?
both roll over, that is correct. But the expectation is that teachers continue to reach out and communicate with parents through second semester if they logged 15. You know, we don't want to penalize them for that, but keeping those logs and obviously communicating when students' grades get to D's and F's. And it's also very nice to reach out when kids are doing well. You know, parents appreciate that as well.
So would it be safe to say that the expectation to log ends whenever they get the hours, but the expectation to communicate never ends?
I think the expectation would be to continue logging even when they're done with the hours, because it allows us, when the parents call and say, I haven't heard from Mrs. Jones, And Mrs. Jones gets questioned by the principal, and the principal, she says, hey, that's not true. I've talked to this parent, boom, 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 numerous dates through second semester. I mean, I think, like I said, I think it protects the school and the teacher. It gives us quite a bit of leverage.
If it was an email communication, could we just have that as our log, you know, because it's in my sent, it's in my.
After the 15?
Right.
Absolutely.
Because if you're calling, then yes, writing something down is good, but if I have an email, that's how I find most of my stuff anyway.
I think that's great,
Okay.
especially after the 15, you know, or if it's
Right.
after hours. Absolutely. I mean, I think that gives us so much.
Because it's in the system.
Well, not like we're trying to win, but if they're saying we're not reaching
Right,
out,
and we
we can
are.
say that we have sent this
Yeah.
out. Agreed,
It's
100%.
It's an easy way to log all in one place. It's not meant to be a requirement, but Joe and I had that conversation, you know. I logged with my parents because I had a couple kids that I was working with to help them get passed, and I wanted to have a real timeline of, you know, hey, the student came in and worked with me on this day, you know, and ended up, you know, being successful and such. So it was, for me, I like I save all my Google Docs in a box in my inbox, and I like it. I can search that easily, but it's not a requirement, but it's also an encouragement of a way of emphasizing that, keep that communication going.
Right. Do we want the time to be in minutes? I know we have that for elementary, 430 minutes, 860 minutes. Do we want the same thing for secondary instead of 7.5 hours? This is just like a tiny little,
I mean,
number thing.
to me, I think you could put 7.5 hours and in parentheses the amount of minutes next to it if you
Right,
want. I mean,
okay.
I think I think you can have both worlds there.
okay.
Same with elementary. If you want to cut that down to hours inside of the minutes, I think that's semantics. But yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I think it's great that we're going to have this clarity starting the school year, and also messages that go out that, you know, communication is both positive and needs improvement, and a good way to start the year that message is going to go out and people can plan accordingly.
At the principal meeting before the school year starts. So Scott can share that with the secondary administrators when he has all of them, as well as Chris and Christy with the elementary.
Great.
When did we say the first day you could start logging was?
First day with students.
First
Okay.
day with students for the conferences, I believe it was June 8th, Michael, or June 9th, I can't remember.
June 9th.
I think it's June 9th.
June 9th. So June 9th is the first day that you could start logging professional development hours.
For this year.
For the upcoming school year.
Professional development hours and
Yes.
parent contact would be the first student day.
That's correct.
Okay.
Do you know if those flex day logs for PD, our principals are making those accessible this summer, or should teachers just keep track and do it in the fall? Do you know, Scott?
I would say just keep track of them in the fall,
Okay.
until the fall.
Okay.
Because I don't believe they've put that Google Doc, I'm sure they probably
No, and
have.
elementary principals
They're
are gone.
So are
And
middle school. Correct.
So, okay.
So maybe that's something you could communicate with members and.
We'll do that, yeah. We'll do it with everybody, the whole bargaining unit.
That'd be great.
Does that wrap up this issue, guys?
Yeah, I think so. Do we have a spot where we're putting this in the agreement? There's like a little mention of it, right?
I think if it's going to be in the administrative
every year.
handbook, then we can, but I don't know if it is, but I think it does need to be memorialized because,
I think that's good.
If you want, that's fine.
Yeah, I think we should put it in the handbook.
yeah. And then maybe our agreement this year can just note that we came up with this and it's noted in the handbook so
Okay.
that we can find that.
Yeah, because I mean, the days will change year.
The dates will change,
Yeah.
but hopefully the consistency and the messaging will be constant.
Okay. Then to answer your question, Stephanie, yes, I think so.
Okay.
All right, one issue checked off. I'm putting a little into our joint statement. I'm putting that information about elementary minutes and secondary minutes. We can see if we like it, but put like a little guide in there. Okay, so we've done that. Okay, the next one, I think, if everyone's ready, is draft P&A language regarding personal leave on Super Bowl Monday. I try to keep it as concise as possible, so if you go into our negotiations team shared folder, there should be, I think, just out in the 21-22 subfolder. The file is named. What did I do? Oh, I think I put it in tentative agreements. Yes, it's in the tentative agreement subfolder, just to prepare for us to have to sign that, which I don't know how we're gonna do without Jay here. We'll figure it out. Okay, it's titled P&A language regarding Super Bowl Monday. So if you open that up, you will see 2 yellow highlighted sections. And I thought we could do it either way. The first way would be to list it as an enumerated exception to personal leave. And so I have it listed as the 6th one. I thought if that way, if you're going through the list, you make sure to check that, or we could just do as an add-on at the end of the list. So I don't know if there's a way that makes, more organizational sense to anyone. Obviously, this is going to be something we're going to have to review next year, so maybe it doesn't go up into the list, but goes tacked on to the end.
Remind me where this document.
Did everyone find it and get a chance to look at it?
It's
Tentative agreements. And then it says Super Bowl Monday.
I'm kind of with you, Rachel. I think if we're just gonna pilot it for a year, maybe to have it just as a paragraph down below
I like that.
until we,
okay.
figure out how it works.
And then when we do block out calendar for next year, I think it should probably be highlighted since it is a change,
Okay.
wherever we put it. I think we do that. Don't you do that
We do,
chronologically on that calendar?
we do, yeah.
Okay.
And we could even look at that lockout calendar just to make sure, or just to look at it.
I think we
We did
normally.
that last year
yeah.
too. Had you guys take a look at it, make sure it matched language.
Guys, other than where you put it, did everyone have a chance to take a look at the language? Comments, questions?
I would get rid of the by on the last, I'm sorry, I'm a language person. Professional employee enters a personal day into the substitute management system no later than.
Okay, I like that. Okay, if we're all in agreement with having it there, I will take out the or. I will take out the first number 6. Okay, if everyone wants to take one more look at that, and then we can figure out during a break how to get PDF that and add signatures.
I like it.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Do we need to do a vote on that since it's?
Yeah.
I mean, you have been. It's a good habit to continue, no matter how large or small the issue is. If it's something going in your contract, I think you need to do your consensus, which is just you're in the room. You could just see if everyone's got thumbs up.
Okay, we're all thumbs up on that one. Okay, so the next topic, if we're ready to move on.
Can I ask something too, just when I think about doing letters and everything next year? Are we kind of in agreement, since this is a pilot, that we're not going to notice it, it's just going to be something we come back and do?
To review it. Again, I think we're always on manageable number of topics, but yeah, I would anticipate we list it as a discussion topic so that we can review numbers So which will vary greatly depending on how the chiefs do, but then we can present numbers on what our, when the request came in and how manageable it was, and if it worked, then we can consider continuing it for another year or permanently putting it in the agreement. Yeah,
Would it kind of fall into those sunsetted items too?
yeah.
So,
Because it'll sunset after
right,
next year.
so we'll need to talk about
But
it
yeah, so,
along with any of
I
the
mean,
other.
I think, I'm assuming you were meaning, like, do we actually need to
Notices.
notice it, or can we just agree as a group?
that's what
that,
I'm
like,
saying, yeah.
We're gonna do it without
Yeah,
it taking up one of their items.
yeah. I think that would be great if we can have that as a practice, like if it's something that we're doing to try something, just like we have done for professional development and continuing to present that data, and to go back to make sure a solution we've developed is actually working. I think it'd be great to continue that practice.
Well, is that what's kind of the spirit that's next on your agenda? Review any sunset items?
Yes, yep. I think so. So I don't know if we just want to everyone just take a couple minutes to just go through and search for years in the agreement. It's really long, but if you do like a control F and search for 201, that should bring up any references to years. And maybe if we see anything other, I don't know of anything other than early resignation, but it probably would be good to just take a couple minutes and do a check and make sure we don't miss anything that we need to.
Yeah, you'll find some things where they talk about not receiving a step in these years, so that'll
Yeah.
pop up in your find, but I mean, that's not a sunset type.
Do you all have side letters in the back of your agreement?
No.
It's a weird phrase, side letters or MOUs attached to the back of it, okay.
No, when we've done them, I think NEA has kept a record and we've kept a record, and we don't attach them to the back of the agreement.
Unless it is an MOU that becomes a permanent part of the contract. But most of our MOUs have been something that's more sensitive for that particular year.
Okay.
Right, like they're limited in time usually.
Right.
Okay. And I assume, Dr. Schumacher, that we would like to continue that incentive program this year?
I would very much be in favor of it.
Okay.
Was there something, Linda, I thought you told me something about where we have the ink in
Yeah,
National Education Association of Shawnee Mission Inc. on page, it's
On the very front.
Article 1, definitions, that were not in ink, right?
yeah. We have, over the past few years, at some point, we dropped the incorporated, so we would like that language removed, and then make sure in all places we're noted as NEA-Shawnee Mission or National Education Association Shawnee Mission.
And there's no dash if you
No
ever
dash.
abbreviate it.
It's a
just
space.
NEA space, yeah.
So we need to see if there's any references to ink. Okay. Does someone want to put a copy of the final, editable copy of the final last year's agreement into this year's folder so that we can start doing a red line? Do we have one?
Joni, doing
We have something called 187-day red line of September 17th, 2020. That's in there.
That's in this year's?
It's a Word doc. Yeah, it's a Word document in our 21-22 negotiation folder. Do you like it as a Word? Like you have to, on my end, if I double click it, it'll open it as a Google Doc. I have to
See,
right click and,
We're gonna have somebody totally reformat it if we want it to be a Google from now on, don't we?
yes, but I like Word docs. But
I do
people are
too.
gonna-
For redlining, I do. I don't like the redline function in Google. So maybe someone just needs to get a Word doc going on their own desktop and do a redline of it. which I'm happy to do. Let's see.
But that version that you all are working off of is the version, it is the current contract from last year.
Right, that's not the P&A, that's a red line.
Yeah,
Oh, got it.
that's what I was going, oh, yeah, that's just individual contracts.
I see.
I know Jay has it,
Jaws fine with
'cause
it.
he's,
I mean,
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take notes and then on a break or over lunch, we can figure out, I know we have the editable version of the whole thing somewhere. It might be in last year's folder.
Yeah, I think it'd be in last year's maybe.
Is it March 2020?
no, that would have been, well, might have started there.
See, we have this Google Doc called Redline Current P&A March 2020.
That's last year.
I think that was the one we went
Oh.
through when we, changed like lockout and all the pre-K stuff and all of that's in
I
there.
bet in my email, I
Yeah,
bet Jay and I were
just went to it.
emailing back and forth.
I just went to my email.
I have the red, yeah, I have to say what John has, red line current P&A, which would have been from last July 23rd, so that's what we finished up last year. It's in the 2021 negotiations.
Yeah, here's,
I've got, oh no, it's PDF.
in the tentative agreements in the 2021 folder,
Can I,
there's tentative P&A July 2020 pending ratification, and it's a Word doc.
That's what we need, right?
can you just move that to our,
Yeah, or I can
Current one.
download it and start.
Yeah, it's a Google Doc, a Google Doc.
I can download it as a Word doc and put it back in the folder.
It's already, it looks like it's already formatted for Google Doc, though.
If it's already a Google Doc and that's what we have,
But to redline it in Word usually works better.
it does.
I don't think we have anything language-wise that sunsets besides that personal, that notification of retirement resignation.
That's the only thing you're seeing? Okay, so for that agenda item, we need to go through, do a search for the word ink. We know it's already on the first page. And then page 11, we need to update the year for early resignation.
Jay must be watching. He says, we need to make a new copy and rename it.
Good idea, Jeff.
That's what I heard. Yeah, so I have it just in the body of this year's,
Folder.
Yeah, I see it, the tentative P&A July 2020,
yeah, I'll just put, 21, 22.
because it got ratified,
Uh-huh.
so it, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just put tentative P&A,
Awesome.
2021, 2022.
Perfect. And that is a Word document?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I can go ahead and download that and start doing a red line. And I will just do the ink, the early resignation, and then as I get time, I can put in we had late resignation. To date, have we had any other TAs that involve language changes? I'm sorry, that's what I meant, Super Bowl, yeah. Okay,
And late resignation.
and late resignation, yeah, Super Bowl. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll make sure that's in red line so that as everyone goes through and reviews it before we say this is the one for ratification, you can clearly see any change that was made. What about, is everyone okay if I go through, we have, I believe, professional employees is a defined term, and so in my mind, that term should always be capitalized. Like, sometimes it's capitalized, sometimes it's not, so typically in contracts where you have definitions like we do in Article 1 here, like district should always be capitalized, board, association, school-based school. I feel like we should always have that term, professional employee, capitalized, and it is in about 40% of the agreement and not the other. So if you're okay, I'll do a find and replace and make sure that term is capitalized throughout the agreement.
This is not an attempt to negotiate this, but, and this might be something to consider too. Do you feel like the $1,000 resignation retirement incentive is enough? Have you thought about that? Because I think that amount, it's been that amount for at least the 11 years I've been doing negotiations. And that might be something to think about, but is it an incentive enough to get people to really move in February?
Probably worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
I think it is, but your point is well taken, that it hasn't been addressed in 11 years.
Yeah.
And is it like a fair market number for that ask? So maybe it's something we look into this year. There's a budgetary piece to it too.
Yeah.
So we'd want to look at that as well.
I just thought maybe that should be something that we could track, seeing, does that move the needle quite a bit?
I know, once we start really advertising that after the new year, with the principals and with you guys as well, we start getting a lot of inquiries, and people want it. I mean, $1,000 is $1,000, so.
But maybe something to look at for next year, get some data on what other school districts do.
Yep, yeah.
Okay.
That's a worthy conversation.
Okay. So I think our only other checkoff, are we good with that? I'll start doing a red line. I think our other checkoff item for quick things this morning, if I look at the joint statement from last time, is share an update on the issue of PLCs. And I don't know who that is or even what that is exactly about.
That was the
Was that us?
strategic
Yeah.
plan committee, yeah.
Correct.
Can you,
Do you want me to pull it up and share?
that'd be awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Maybe we can tag team this?
Yeah.
John, Lindsay and I, well, anyone. Dr. Morgan too.
Do you want me to just share the menu that we had created? Okay. Okay. So when we met, we had talked about, how do we give, more PLC time more consistently? So as a group, we kind of brainstormed what other buildings were doing, currently to give more PLC time. So we had kind of come up with a menu of options that buildings could decide from, you know, what worked with them, because, you know, depending on what elementary especially you were in, staffing wise, what you could accomplish. So yeah.
So we had a good representative group of elementary principals and teachers, as well as middle school administrators and teachers. Everyone agreed that it was something that we wanted to continue to work on, but felt like, given the timeline, we couldn't accomplish a system-wide approach for the 21-22 school year. So given that, we, again, just to reiterate what Lindsay said, we brainstormed what all the buildings were doing, came up with this list. The middle schools are a little more lockstep, and Dr. Gilhouse, you might be able to speak to this too, but they meet weekly, I think, and they kind of came up with a plan on their own to do something pretty uniformly to find that PLC time during mascot time, I think is the consistent way that they're going to do it.
Correct, and they get a little bit more flexibility with 40 minutes before school starts in the morning, as well as mascot attached right after, so they get a little bit more leeway.
Right. Elementary, of course, is a little harder. They did find, and Dr. Morgan might be able to speak to this too, that the addition of the building subs last year and the continuation of the building subs next year is going to provide an opportunity to do some more PLC time that way. Banking the PLC time, I'm just kind of going through our list here. That's another way that one of the buildings was doing. And then the buddy teams, and there was a lot of different kind of iterations of that buddy team. So the ask that we made as a subcommittee was that, especially at the elementary level, that Ms. Darby and Mr. Lowe would work with those principals and share this menu and any other ideas that they had, and make the ask that, listen, we need to find some form of PLC time, a consistent way to provide that during this kind of transition year, we hope, so that your teachers are getting at least some PLC time in this next year. Is that a fair? Okay. John, did I? Yeah. So one of the things we did ask at the end too was, does everyone see a need to continue this conversation to try to find that guarded time like the high school has in a coming year, in a subsequent year, so 22, 23 perhaps. Everyone agreed that we do, but we absolutely need to engage with parents and find a way to meet their needs as well, especially again at the elementary level, because the subcommittee, they really felt pretty adamantly that the best way to do it was without kids in the building. That, of course, presents some issues for parents. So we'll continue this work. We'd absolutely invite Lindsay and John and whomever else to be a part of that as we do that work next year.
I know that Olathe next year is implementing something with their elementary teachers. I don't think it's weekly. I think it's a half a day, once a month.
Okay.
So that might be something for your committee just to kind of watch and see how that is working out.
That's a good point.
And then I had a question, when the subcommittee was looking at this, were we keeping in mind the need for specials teachers to be able to PLC? And is there any thought to how they can PLC, like in their feeder area, like can music teachers from the south area, whether that's via WebEx or whatever? Because I think that's something that group of people have communicated how valuable it is to have content area PLCs as opposed to art, music, PE, and library in one building PLC.
There was some discussion.
The first staff meeting, the first Tuesday, I guess I should say, of every month is set aside for that to happen, for I think special ed and specialists. I can't remember, and then some other content things happen on that first Tuesday of every month, I believe is what it is. I can go back and check the calendar. The other thing is one of the non-negotiables, I believe is the word that was used when we talked about special schedules, is that 8:10 to 8:30 time would always be guarded in all buildings. So, I mean, we even talked about in my building that, so that could mean that one day, none of my specials team would have that morning duty, so then they would have 7:50 to 8:30, 8:25 to meet collaboratively, and my social worker will be available for that.
So I think that, just advocating on their behalf, that might be something to pass on to Christy and Chris, because I think that would require some coordination in feeder areas to do that. And I think they took on a brunt this year in elementary school since they taught remotely and in person, and I think they probably learned some things from that they could share with each other and people could benefit from. And also, I think the PLC process I think everyone needs to feel that they have a PLC and it's a true PLC, or it kind of, I think that's the benefit for the whole school, if there's value in that for everyone.
Abby, when you were saying that that first Tuesday staff meeting is for that, is that something that all the elementaries are going to be utilizing?
Yes, it's on our PD calendar that was shared with us.
Okay. Are there middle and high school teachers, though, that also are going to travel to the elementaries to be music, art, PE teachers?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So for middle, they don't, their staff meetings are in the morning, so they might not be able to be part of that, but high school, their staff meetings are after school, so just something else to think about, because I don't know if they'd be able to be part of your PLC.
They're after school, and then if they can't make the after school, they redo a makeup in the morning.
Yeah.
So if they couldn't, middle school, high school is always going to be a challenge just
Yeah.
based on start dates and band and orchestra that first hour, which is common across all 5 of them.
And then just here at the bottom, we had middle school, like Dr. Schumacher said, they were using mascot hour time on Tuesdays. And then the middle schools had talked about using one Tuesday a month would be staff meeting, and then the other 3 Tuesdays would be PLC. And that they would hold, all the middle schools would have their staff meeting, that was a staff meeting on the same Tuesday, so that PLCs could happen together between buildings.
That's good.
Yeah, the middle school principals are really taking the lead on their own PLC time.
It's the second Tuesday of every month.
Oh, okay, great, yeah.
So not exactly where we want to be,
Right.
but I think a positive next step, and then with the commitment to continue the work in the 21-22 school year.
Okay. Do we have any other?
Thank you for doing that table. Can you send it to me again so I can get it to Chris?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have anything else on our short list. I think in terms of larger noticed items, all we have to do is finish the processes on both the grievance procedure and on compensation. And so I don't know I'm happy to go either way. I think where we should maybe have a discussion about whether there's a possibility that we can finish our team's work for the year today, or whether we think that that's too much time pressure. But it may just, and I think it depends on how things go with the compensation discussion. Obviously, it may not be possible, but I could see a possibility where we finish the grievance discussion if we happen to reach a tentative consensus that would include any language changes to the grievance procedure. I'd be happy to work on those over lunch. We could come back and review it afterward. Just
Well,
something.
so guys, tell me about, are we missing Jay today? All day?
Not all day, I think he could get here after lunch.
And I asked that because I know he was part of an economic team. But did the teams, so how far did your teams, the 3 different teams, get on economics? Remember, the assignment was, can your team work on bringing back a possible way to do salary this year that your team reached consensus on without digging into it more as though an option for everyone to look at. And then knowing there will be two other teams, meaning a total of three, perhaps different, sometimes not, options in terms of the way you might look at salary. How far did each team get in that? Last year we got to a point where that each team could share a spreadsheet on, here's what we did. And if you didn't get that far, at least give us a pretty comprehensive update. Did all three teams get to that point? Or do we need more team time today?
I think we will.
And
need
if
more
so, I
time.
guess it would be after the report.
Yeah, I think we all met.
Say again, Jill?
We all met, but I think as Rachel was saying earlier, there has been some adjustment to how the Board of Education was going to be using their ESSER funds. And so
Okay.
we will need to meet with our teams again.
Okay, so the individual teamwork does need the update for the individual teamwork to be complete. And then your next step is come back and look at it all together. Okay.
And Jay,
So then-
Jay just texted me that he will not make it here in time to be here in person today.
Well, so then it does sound as though then sort of what's left is either go ahead and get the update now or jump into grievance now. One or the other, either order, update before lunch, then have lunch, and then teams meet after lunch. What are you guys thinking?
If you want, I can go see if Russ is available. Okay. That way it's not, everyone has some time to think about it before we meet in our sub-teams. And I don't think we'll need a huge amount of time, but it's new information that may or may not change the team's plan, so. Okay, I'm gonna take a 2-minute restroom break, since we gotta wait for Russ to get here anyway.
All right, you guys want to all take a 2 minutes? When you are, did Russ make it in?
He's here.
Russ is here.
Oh,
There's John.
Good morning, Russ. I'm not sure if this is a pretty simple report or if you need to screen share. Either way, I'm just gonna go ahead and kick it to you.
Well, thank you. Good morning. So what do you need from me?
They need a summary of the board's decision on re-budgeting ESSER funds in light of the Department of Education's May 26th guidance, that we are permitted to issue premium payments to school staff pursuant to specific programs.
Okay. So from the ESSER 2 plan that was formulated and presented to the board in April, there was $2,300,500 that was dedicated to HVAC. So the board agreed to take that pot of money and use that towards a stipend, a one-time stipend with ESSER 2 monies. If you do the math on that, we have and they wanted to do it for all pay groups. So when you do the math on that, we have about 3,431 positions across the district. That comes out to about a $600 stipend, and that would use up that $2.3 million of HVAC dollars.
And if I'm remembering correctly, the hope, because those needs still need to be addressed, is that when we receive ESSER 3, that we would use some of that for HVAC improvements. Is that?
Yeah, so that pot of money you could use the 2.3 from ESSER 3 to do some HVAC down the road in about 2 years.
I just wanted to state that because I know when our sub-team met, at that point we knew the board was meeting, and it was, we talked about the fact that particularly in some buildings there are HVAC needs that need to be addressed in the short term. So just wanted to share that information with everyone, is that those needs are still there and there's still, a plan, but basically to delay it to allow for these payments to staff. It does, under the guidance, the guidance that existed about you can't issue bonus payments still exists, right? So the new guidance didn't change that. You still can't issue bonus payments under the allowable uses. If you pay a staff member for their time, it has to be like recorded time that they spend in excess of their contract time doing things to address learning loss. So for the new guidance, you can do things like retention bonuses that award people for returning to their position the next school year. So I don't know of any other, that's pretty much, I think, what all school districts are looking at in order to take advantage of that premium pay program guidance that came out is basically a retention payment.
Yeah, that's correct. The guidance still says you cannot do a retroactive pay with ESSER dollars. So you can't pay for anything from this school year that we're just wrapping up. It has to be a plan that you have in place and approved to have payment for services that are going to be provided in the future. And so a lot of districts trying to brainstorm, figure out how they would do that and meet the guidelines to pass an audit, and you would think, well, retention pay. So they're coming back from last year and going to teach this next school year retention pay, and meets the incentive guidelines of the federal regulations.
So the thinking would be if an employee started the 2020-2021 school year, completed the 2021 school year, and then started the 21-22 school year, they would be eligible for the incentive.
That's correct.
How does this affect people on, let's say, parental leave? they're coming back, but they're starting the year on parental leave, or they finished the year on parental leave?
I think the way we would address it is if you're an active employee.
Okay,
So those are usually, they're active still in HR system and payroll system, they're just out on FMLA.
okay.
So they're still active employees.
If they're out on FMLA, I think we need to think through that a little bit. So if they're out on FMLA, yes, they would still be active, but we term, like, so if they go out on parental leave, health leave, any of those extended leaves, they're technically, I think, termed from our system.
That would be helpful when we decide that, if you could share that information with us as we're trying to navigate. Probably what we'll do is just direct those people to you, but, so they know that. And so also that would mean, let's say you had a January hire or a November hire from last year, they would be eligible?
We talked about using the P&A language where I think it's, you have to work 2 days or hired, what is it, 2 days after the start of the second semester, then you would be eligible for a column movement. We would use that language for this application as well, so that we're
Okay.
consistent.
Step.
Step.
So if you're in the P&A, it's 2 days after the start of the second semester, you're hired that day or after, you're not eligible for a step.
Okay. Do we have very many of those people?
Good few,
Okay,
good few. I mean, we were hiring all year long
Yeah.
this year. But.
Russ,
that
when you
date-
gave the,
That date
Russ
is-
gave the 3,000 something number, that would equate to a $600 stipend. Is that number all staff, or you've already backed out the staff that wouldn't qualify from that number?
The 3,431 is all staff, all pay groups.
And to the extent, this was another decision, I mean, the board was pretty concerned about making sure we do those HVAC updates. And so they would leave that budget item in their ESSER2 funds budget and application, because they're gonna have to budget, they're gonna have to update the application, correct?
Yes.
And so to the extent that we don't, that there is any money left over, if there is any from this, it would be allocated to HVAC improvements, so that we can begin that process.
That would be the plan.
And just to finish my thought, that 2 days after the start of the semester is going to be much different this year, because that's going to be what, January 26th or something? We just need to look back at that.
January 22nd was the end of the first semester. Is the 3,431, that would mean, we actually have more than that when you count the new hires for next year, correct?
Yeah, we won't know the official number until September, when we say we do this, the retention in September, we would look at it at that time. But yeah, we got so much turnover right now going in. That 3,400 number is probably based on an April
Okay.
matrix.
But anyone starting this year wouldn't
They
get
wouldn't get
that.
it.
It would not. It would not.
Nor would retirees or anyone that resigned.
And that's for compliance.
Right.
Well, is it important for, I guess it's really not, is it important for folks to know then how many folks would qualify? And, or is the $600 regardless? And then what's extra goes to HVAC is what the board is talking about?
Yes.
So lesser employees doesn't mean more than 600?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to see clarity.
Any more questions for us before we let him go?
Is that money taxed at a lump sum, or is it part of salary and therefore taxed like wages?
We talked about doing it in a separate check, so it'd be taxed at a lower amount. If you ran it with their regular payroll, then that would add on to their normal gross monthly, which would probably increase the taxes a little bit more. and doing a single lump.
A
check.
separate check taxed at their wage rate?
Say that again?
A separate check taxed at their normal wage rate?
Yes.
Okay.
This would be capers too. Capers would come out of this. It would count towards your capers average salary.
And this is, you're thinking more September time when this would come?
Yeah, when you correlate with your first, well, I guess it's up to you guys. It'd probably be no earlier than September because your first check is September 20th for the new school year. So
Okay.
September, October, November, whatever, I guess.
Yeah,
You guys
but
want
if
to
you
have that
wanted to push
discussion.
it, yeah.
That was quick and easy. Russ, any other questions, or can we let Russ go? Okay. Russ, thank you for the info.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russ.
Guys, if you remember when we talked about grievance procedure last time, I think you talked and then we said, we're just gonna kind of let it sit. I feel like we could jump into grievance procedure before lunch and then teams meet after lunch. Or teams can meet now, take a lunch and then come back and do either more conversation on salary or jump to grievance then. What are you guys feeling?
It's only 10:07. We probably have time to, we may potentially have time to do our problem solving on grievance, and like if we're not breaking till noon, and then even just have the teams meet before, during, after lunch, and then come back. And do any follow-up steps we need to do for grievance and compensation.
Linda, I haven't talked to Jay, but do you think he'd be able to like meet through like a phone with you guys? Or would he rather do it in person?
Yeah, that's the other, I mean, I don't want, like, I think there is a possibility we could finish today. If it's important that, you know, Jay's like here to finish the discussion, we can always break when it makes sense and come back for our Wednesday meeting.
Jay has our spreadsheet, you know, and I would prefer that he be here.
Yeah.
I think-
No, I totally get that. So what makes sense to try and have on our agenda today then?
I think we should look at grievance and, is there anything else? What are you thinking, Jill?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing we've got.
Okay, so maybe we could potentially just end at lunch today with our sub-teams meeting and then do our final work on Wednesday morning.
Yeah, I don't think our sub-team's gonna be able to meet today.
Gotcha, okay.
And we have full day tomorrow retreat for our local and our area UniServe for NEA, so I'm not available all day tomorrow to meet with my.
So then it sounds like you'll need to build in some team meeting time in the morning Wednesday, correct?
I think so.
Teams could meet today
Okay.
and or then Wednesday.
Call in.
Okay, well then let's go ahead and jump into the grievance conversation, guys. While you are sort of recollecting where we left it, I'm gonna pull up the document. We did, I think, IBB it pretty far. I don't know how far we got in terms of solutions, but I'll pull up that document real quick. And anybody else that wants to sort of frame how you think we left it, or any thoughts on where we pick it up, just jump in there. It's gonna take me just a second. This was one where it felt as though, you know, when we do that training, 5 sources of conflict, the one source of conflict that starts to be hard to deal with being what either party might perceive as a value for one reason or another. It started to feel like the association felt as though the arbitration component of the grievance procedure represented a value that was more than just arbitration. You know, right or wrong, that's sort of was where it was heading. those are hard conflicts to resolve because values are really core beliefs. So I think you got to a point where you had some good conversation, you heard each other, but then we just said, it just feels like we need a break. So that's kind of where we had left it. I don't know if there were other areas that you guys were talking about, but it seemed like when it got to the arbitration piece, that was pretty core.
Yeah. I think we're probably just to the part of, throwing out possible solutions.
Trying to find my document. I did take notes on that, right? Lindsay, did I take
I
it?
think you emailed it to me. Let me see if I've got it.
Oh, see if you can shoot it back to me and I'll
I
screen
can't find it
share.
in the email, so I think that might have been a day that you weren't taking notes.
Oh, it might have been.
Let me look at my sent and then, I don't know why I wouldn't have saved it. I usually don't delete these till you TA them. 1 second.
Yeah, I don't see anything either. I think maybe Lindsay did have notes in it that we pulled up because we've done like 2 separate sessions on the grievance procedure, and I feel like when we had our last session, we were looking at something that,
What was the date of our, when we talked a lot about it?
May 11th.
It was May 11th. Okay, I would have sent it right at the end if I did. It just seems like there was 1 or 2 sessions where Lindsay was doing more note taking.
We've got a lot of it in the meeting notes for.
Taking a medicine that makes me cough, and that's why I'm on mute all the time.
Was it the 20th where the bulk of the notes are, John?
I see
Are you
frame and focus.
are you finding anything,
interests,
Lindsay?
Solutions.
Yeah, we're finding some of it in meeting notes.
Yeah, May 11th, I have most of the notes.
And then this one says revise on 5/25.
Yeah, I think I went back through and just added it to the old notes and highlighted any changes.
You may need to screen share then, Lindsay, but let me just make sure. Usually when you're IBB in something, I do capture 5 steps, but you guys are getting pretty good at it. I think you were, Lindsay, because there were a couple things I said, hey, I would add this or I would put that. So yeah, I think your notes are the process notes. Do you want to screen share?
Yeah.
That's a good thing when you guys become your own note taker, yeah. Yeah, right. Right, the issue was, the board would like to, make the grievance procedure more efficient and effective, but then you all took the time to say, okay, what's the issue statement? How do we make the grievance procedure more effective and efficient in resolving concerns? I think you guys listed the sort of 3 steps there, ending with an arbitrator. I think, who was it? Rachel, you gave some feedback on what other districts tend to do. And most commonly, the board is the final, whereas in yours, you all's agreement, an arbitrator, a third-party arbitrator is the final decision maker on grievances, within what's legal. Go back up a little bit, Lindsay. I think you guys acknowledge that a lot of things don't even go through the grievance procedure or not all the way because you all both are all leaders on both sides work hard to resolve. Yeah, and then when it talks and it's been there since 1969, it's gold standard. That's when it started getting into, I was hearing people feeling like it was a value, so I would encourage you to, try to be open-minded and recognize that's going on within yourself. There are the interests. I won't read each one. Resolving issues at lowest possible level, process 2. Yeah, so that was when I think Linda was saying, hey, it's served us well. We haven't been in front of an arbitrator all that much, right? That you guys do solve at lowest level and you don't actually have to use that step often. And then the very clear issue is raised of, you know, having a ratifiable contract, where if do your members see it as this value issue? Okay. Lindsay, you've got the notes in front of you. You guys will probably recollect more what your possible solutions were, and then we'll go into homework. You want
That was
to,
homework
anybody want to
from-
talk about possible solutions you talked about, or you guys want to just look at the list?
That was homework from several times ago, so
Oh,
that
okay.
we've already done.
Oh, that's right.
I think maybe just, going back to solutions, in light of, the homework that was done and the information that was shared.
Rachel, if those solutions are fresh to you and you have a working knowledge of them, you want to kind of walk through those and we can see where
Yeah.
people are starting to get traction, or there's some that come off the list.
So, there's a couple of things that I thought of that even as I reviewed other school districts' agreements, and we know that our grievance procedure hasn't been updated for a really, really long time, that could be helpful components that go to the idea of let's resolve things at the lowest possible level and make sure we have an effective grievance procedure. So the things in that arena that I thought of that I highlighted as we went through other districts' procedures were, one, to expand the definition of a grievance to not include just a violation, but also like a misinterpretation or misapplication of the P&A. To consider that, because most school districts, it wasn't just a violation, it was, you're not reading this correctly, that's not what it says, that's not what it's meant to be. And so I think that might be helpful, and it may maybe sort of take the heat out of a grievance too, is I'm not saying that you principal violated this, I'm saying you're misinterpreting it and you're misapplying it, and that resulted in harm to me as follows. So maybe considering that, just because I saw that come up repeatedly in the definition of what a grievance is. Another possible thing that I thought we could consider is that several of them
Good
had
example.
an informal
Do you mind, on that one, Rachel,
Yeah.
would you pause and just give an example?
of like what a misinterpretation would be.
Right, what is the kind of a working example, so people can kind of get their head around that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some issues that we've had come up that resulted in like grievances that quickly got resolved. Like lots of things around like scheduling and timing. Like, no, this is really when this is supposed to start, or this is really the number of days that I get, or anything that's like, you just read this provision incorrectly, this is really what it means. Or you're reading language into the agreement that doesn't exist there. I think most commonly grievances are gonna be around issues that professional employees raise about schedules and pay. So I'm supposed to have this lunch break. I should have this, what is it called? What's it called? Plan time. This is when my plan time is supposed to start. This is how we're supposed to be scheduling plan time. Those sorts of things. I shouldn't have had a deduct day. Those are the things that
And now, do those grievances not get filed now?
No, they do from time to time. They're usually resolved pretty quickly, I think. I mean, either through.
I guess what I'm saying is are you saying the grievance procedure is used when there are misunderstandings and misrepresentations, but the definition doesn't say it?
Right. I mean, the wording that is then used is you violated it. And I think that I'm just thinking about how it feels to be the recipient of a grievance when because the principal is typically the lowest level of that, right? And so we're trying to say, hey, this is a cooperative, like when you look to the purpose in our agreement, it contains some really nice language about through cooperative problem solving and discussion, we can resolve things at the lowest possible level. So I'm just putting myself in a principal's shoes and saying, gosh, if I got something that's like you violated the P&A, my first thought would be, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be in trouble with my boss. I've generated a grievance, I did something wrong. And so just even having that language in there that, oh, I just misunderstood or I misinterpreted might be helpful. An idea, I don't know that it changes the application, going to your question, Stephanie. I don't know that it at all would actually change the application. And I don't know, there may be more professional employees who use it more because they say, well, I don't have to call out my principal. I can just say you haven't read the agreement correctly. And to that end, something else that I saw in some agreements that I think would be worthwhile for us to consider is like a like a pre-step, like an informal step where you don't actually have to fill out all the paperwork, but your first step is a discussion with the principal. Again, I'm just putting myself in a principal's shoes, and if I have violated someone's plan time rights, I would feel so much better if they came to me and said, hey, let's have an informal discussion. I don't want to file a grievance, but, my first step is to have a discussion with you, and I think that this is an issue. It's a little awkward, I think, for both sides to have to well, one, it's work intensive. You got to fill out the whole grievance form. But two, to have it as already jumped to a formal process. Just an idea.
So that is the process we follow. Of course, non-members who we don't work with in this process probably do go straight to a grievance because they don't have the benefit of working with a building rep. Our discussions are always about, we always start with, we think a grievance is you disagree with, you're not interpreting the agreement the same way. So, if you want to memorialize that, I think that's fine. I think as an association, that's what we mean when we say we work at the local level. And that's why it's generally the building rep that brings that concern to the principal, because they have a relationship. And, many times they will say, hey, I think you have to be wary of this because that would be grievable. And lots of times it's a principal saying, I'm thinking about trying this, do you think that would violate the agreement? So I don't know if you are putting that step in for people that are not association members. But that is the nature of how we work. And the goal is to always try and resolve things before you get to a grievance. And we always say when we're working with principals, a grievance is just that. We're at a point where we're not agreeing to the intent of the P&A. And so we need to have some discussion. We need to have a more formal process to go through and see what that is.
Because I think typically, someone brings a concern and, I know I've heard lots of building reps say, well, have you talked to the principal yet? And, you need to talk to them. Or if you don't feel comfortable, I can go with you, or, I can have a conversation. I think typically that's, at least on, people who are members, that's how we try to solve that.
Okay.
I would agree with both of you. It happens up through the chain too. I think our discussion this morning might be a good example of that, of ongoing conversations just to try to work things out and make sure that our interpretation is similar to your interpretation. And I do wonder if it would be helpful to memorialize it in some way to encourage it, to encourage it for all staff members. You're correct. The process is
The intent of a grievance process, in my opinion, is how I roll, is to never to never make someone feel like we're coming after you. What we're trying to do is to protect the agreement, because if something is not being interpreted the way you believe the language came to be there, then you chip away at an agreement that both sides have agreed to over time. And so it's, Dr. Fulton and I have had that conversation numerous times. We disagree, but it's not a personal thing. It's that we are working to really make sure that the agreement is being followed as we believe it should be. And if not, then we need to put better language into the agreement so that we can, we don't erode the work of what people have done over time. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I just don't want anything that makes it, because I think teachers are reluctant, professional employees are reluctant often to file a grievance because they do not feel there's a power imbalance. And the grievance process evens out that power imbalance because it's not personal. It's about, there's a disagreement in what the agreement stands for. So, and maybe this will help it, maybe that proves your point, that, hey, this is just we're misunderstanding, and maybe everyone will be more willing, to have those discussions and work harder at resolving them without having to go down the road of filing a grievance. No one wants to file a grievance, and, if it can be resolved someplace else, another way.
And then the last thing that I saw in that arena was just potentially looking, if we retain the arbitration provision, at who our selection pool is. I think we, depending on the size of that pool, could still retain the process of each party picks a certain number and then you do a one-by-one elimination. But I don't think that the AAA has served us well, and I think it would be helpful to either look at, did I list it there last time? Oh yeah, the Kansas Federal Court list and or FMCS would probably give us a better list of people that A, have some familiarity with Kansas law, and B, frankly, employment law, and labor relations. So other school districts don't commonly have, at least in Kansas, an arbitration provision. I didn't see in there, other groups to choose from, but I think we should consider those two. And I know sort of, the difficult hurdle that we have is this issue of, the board being the final step. I mean, the board is very, they have a strong interest in that. I think that, if that's not something that our team can come to a solution on, I would say that for fairness purposes, if the association has a right to bring a grievance over a violation, misapplication, or misinterpretation, it would make sense to make that go both ways so that the board, as the other party to the agreement, also has that right. I agree with Stephanie's comment that I think it would be, the most common grievance would be by an individual professional employee. I think that's our most common. But I think it's helpful to have a procedure spelled out should the association or the board, as the other party to the agreement, have a concern about a misapplication, misinterpretation, or violation.
Thing up that, Kevin, what you have discussed is already in the agreement on, he's my expert on this policy, page 15 of the agreement, letter I. L, thank you. And Kevin also said we have never used AAA, so I don't think it'd be we have no problem with getting rid of them. We've never used that for arbitration. It may not be page 15 on this.
Yeah, 16 on the PDF tool.
So that says, nothing in this article shall preclude a professional employee from discussing a grievance with their principal or immediate supervisor in an effort to informally resolve a grievance. Mm-hmm. So I think that language is already there.
Yeah, and I think that language is helpful. I think it's worth us discussing whether to include it as a pre-step or first step in the procedure like several of the other districts had, so that if I'm a professional employee, whether, I'm an NEA member or not, when I go to that, I say, okay, my first step is to have a discussion. I don't have to fill out the paperwork and slide something, across the desk to my principal or email it to them and start off on that base, but rather my first step is to have a discussion and say, I'm doing this as an initial step so we don't go to, further in the grievance process.
I think it's redundant, but I don't know what other people think.
I know we have had situations, and they may not have been ones that NEA was involved in, where I had a principal say, this person didn't even talk to me, and now I've got a grievance, and it's put a, makes me uncomfortable now, because that's how they addressed it initially. So that's why I was thinking about it. I don't know. Just something I think worth discussing. And does anyone have any other, it's a lengthy, meaty procedure to get through, but as I looked at the other ones and said, I think that's a good idea, those are the only things that I really saw.
I don't know what vehicle the board would have to work with us, since the board in all my 6 years as president have not ever officially reached out to me as the leader of this association when they have a personal concern. And
So-
I'm not sure what that would even look like.
As I sit and think about this during breakfast or whatever, about how that would actually look, the reason that doesn't happen is because the board can't act individually, and they're very aware of that, right? And so board members are very cognizant that they don't have, that their individual views are not necessarily the views of the board as a whole. And so it is often challenging for the board to act through one individual board member. And we have certain processes where our board president will be, the representative for the board. So that would be a way to consider it, but probably more appropriately, the superintendent frequently asks as the board's representative. And so I think if we had either one or two steps in there, it would look something like the superintendent and or the board president meeting with the NEA-Shawnee mission president if there's a concern, and vice versa for the association, right? That it would work both ways.
So this would be my response to the board. We already have, Dr. Hubbard and I have already met in her transition. We meet regularly. Jill, as the vice president, is going to come on board, as will be members of the executive leadership team. We do this on an ongoing basis, and they bring those concerns. I think this challenges that collaborative relationship, and I think I would be remiss in not saying that.
To keep it between I would envision still those discussions happening at that level.
I don't know how the board, it's not clear to me, sorry. Maybe I need a break and use the restroom then so we can come back and explain it. If the board is never going to work directly with the association anyways, then we already have the process in place with that. We meet repeatedly with the superintendent. I think that what this does is, as soon as we're going to put language in there, that's going to be lawyers, because you represent the board. And so we're talking what would normally be resolved between the leadership of the association and the leadership of the district, acting on behalf of the board, is going to become lawyers now in the process. And that is going to, I think, create the opposite of effect of what you all want. I also think that then becomes very public, whereas we are able to deal with a lot of sensitive and passionate subjects that both sides have. We're able to do that privately and work through things and move on. And when you have this process where the board says that, then I think that comes up in board meetings, where you finally want to be able to address and speak to the whole board. So I guess I need more an example of what the board's asking for this, because this process is in place right now. And it has worked really well for us, not only in my years, but Nancy Fritz, who was here 5 years before me, and Cheryl Siegel. I personally, when Dr. Hubbard comes in, she will be the 4th superintendent that I've worked with in starting my 7th year. So have a lot of history of this working, and I just think it's going to result in the the opposite of what the board what they're asking for. And it does seem not in the spirit of collaboration to me.
So I think that Linda has sort of visualized what she thinks that, and then responded to it. Does anyone else have a vision of what that idea would look like? And does anyone else have any reactions? Questions?
Well, I mean, I think we could, if it was, I think we could design it however we wanted in light of the structures that's already in place. I mean, again, I think it just goes to that right now, in terms of, equity and fairness, the P&A gives the right for the association to go to an outside arbitrator to seek a decision on a concern about a violation of the agreement. And, the board's concerned that they don't have that same ability. So that mechanism exists for one party to have access to an outside arbitrator. That's the association. The other party to the agreement, the board, doesn't have that ability. Now, however it is that we reach that, to make sure that we have a structure in place that allows for a, resolution at the lowest possible level without, necessarily any public, exposure or knowledge of that, I think that that's all very solvable. And I would be amenable to any structure that gets us there, including, that it's just an informal conversation and then the board can access the arbitrator if they want to, or there's the same number of steps, or, whatever makes sense given how that relationship currently works.
I guess I just can't wrap my brain around, and again, because I'm living it from my side, I can wrap my brain around why a professional employee would file a grievance, that something within the P&A has been violated. I guess I can't wrap my brain around what instances the board is concerned about filing a grievance against the association about.
So it would be anything where there's, a requirement on either the association's part or on professional employees' part to do something or act a certain way under the agreement. So there's agreements on both sides. This will happen, but this happens.
I can give one example where a grievance was filed against a union. It doesn't happen very often. They're in a particular public agency in the state of Pennsylvania, right? That's vague enough. There's so many agencies. The union is scheduled to come in and do new hire orientations with the employees that are hired in when they're in their 3 to 4 week sort of get to know our agency, basic training, orientation, benefit program. And the union just didn't have their stuff together for a long period of time and just was very spotty, no-showy, and unreliable about showing up for the orientations. And there was a big change in union leadership. There was no communication. There wasn't this sort of avenue to reach out. And the agency, filed a grievance to get their attention. Look, this says that you shall, on this day, come and spend 2 hours with new hires. It's a shame that the agency had to do that. That is one example of I know where a grievance has been filed against the union. I don't know of another example. I've seen language, but it's just not that often. But that's one example, if that's helpful.
I guess I just, I get what you're saying, but I just feel like within the district, there's a good enough relationship with Linda to where someone in the district would reach out and be like, hey, Linda, this is a problem. She's pretty easy to get a hold of, if there's an issue, or reaching out to Jill or Kevin or whoever. I don't know. Well, it just feels like, it kind of feels like a way of holding things over the association's head.
Well, I guess the thing I would say to that is we can all agree, and I think honestly that both Linda and Kevin and Jill and Dr. Hubbard, as far as her new role, are super easy to get a hold of and very amenable to conversations, but the association would never say, well, we don't need anything formally put into place because we have these great relationships. We know that we can solve them at the lowest possible level, so on and so forth. I mean, that's, and nor would we ask for that, right? So I think what the board is seeking is kind of that same process. Yeah, we will continue along with what has been working, but give us some formal steps as well, should we ever have to access that.
I mean, does the association feel like they don't need access to the grievance procedure, that it should just be for professional employees?
The association files a grievance, there's only one section that the association can actually file a grievance on. Is it Article 3, Kevin? Otherwise, that's the only aspect of the agreement that the association files an agreement on behalf of the association. Otherwise, it has to be an individual. That's why, in many ways, there's so few grievances that are filed, because the power is with the Board of Education. Power is with management. And so it's the little guy going up against the big guy. So we're only talking about, out of 12 articles in the agreement, one where we even have that ability.
I don't see that anywhere, and I mean, I've read this a ton. There's no definition to me of, there's a definition for a grievance by a professional employee, but there's not for the association. And I don't see, and please Kevin, point out to me if I've missed it, where the language limits that the association can only file on Article 3. I don't see that anywhere in here.
Page, I don't know, it's Article 7, the terms and conditions, it says agreements about the association claim.
I can't hear whoever's speaking.
He's pointing us,
Go to page 13, terms and conditions.
Page 13, terms and conditions.
it just says, agreements by the association is the claim that its specific rights as provided under this agreement have been violated.
This goes back to Article 3 is the only thing the association can file under.
And hang on, what's article, you think that based on the title of Article 3?
Well, yeah, because that's the association's rights.
It's not limited that way in the agreement.
Who is talking?
Kevin Scarrow, the NEA Uniserve director, is here, and he's sharing that he believes that the language of the grievance procedure limits what the association can file on is just under Article 3, which is an article that recognizes the respective rights and obligations of the parties, I believe.
Kevin, in all the years you've been here, has NEA-Shawnee Mission ever filed a grievance under anything besides that particular article?
No, it always has to be the individual. And that was an interpretation by previous management that the only thing the association could do was to, under Article 3, which forced the employee to file the grievance. Which is different from every other grievance for the most part in the state, too.
So are you
So-
saying in other parts of the state, the association can file on behalf of anything in the contract?
That is true.
But we're limited to just to the rights that our association have that are spelled out in Article 3. So is the board interested in broadening that for both parties?
I mean, I think as long as there's equity there, right? So if Article 3 is where going forward, we recognize the rights of either party, then it may make sense to limit the grievance procedure for both sides to Article 3 for a violation, misinterpretation, or misapplication of that. Or alternatively, if we think that it makes sense for either party to be able to use the grievance procedure as a way to determine if there has been a violation, misinterpretation, or misapplication.
I don't see a need to broaden it, like, for us for the association to be able to file a grievance besides what's in Article 3.
So I have a question for you. If an employee feels they're improperly disciplined, the union doesn't file a grievance, the employee must?
The employee does with the assistance of the association if they're an association member. So the association's definitely involved, but it's in a representative capacity as opposed to a party capacity.
Okay, gotcha.
If we did that, and clearly defined that grievances on behalf of either party are limited to Article 3, another question that has come up with the board is, could we use the earlier stages of the grievance procedure as a mechanism for having a discussion about a concern about a prohibited practice rather than just filing it? So that potentially we could say that, it's Article 3 plus concerns about a prohibited practice, maybe attempts to resolve, maybe, may use the earlier stages of the grievance procedure. Now, obviously, you couldn't have an arbitrator deciding that. That's a DOL decision, but I just think it might be helpful to have that as a mechanism so that you have basically an early resolution procedure solidified in the agreement so that you potentially
Rachel,
avoid.
how do you know that the district hasn't always had a right to use the grievance procedure? It just doesn't, like most employers.
It's come up when there's been concerns and I've been asked, what can we do? What's our procedure? What's our mechanism? And, generally the answer has to be, yes, informal conversations can happen, or it's nothing, or you have to resort to filing a prohibited practice, which I go back to my same statement about having to file a grievance. It's like as soon as you've filed whatever the actionable papers are to get a process started, I think it adds stress to a situation or heat to a situation. And sometimes that's what has to be done. Those steps have to be followed. But I personally like having a way that's like, okay, here's the starting point. This is your process. This is what you do. And I think even though Linda's developed a very strong relationship with our leadership, again, we always talk about, well, what's going to happen 5 and 10 years down the road to the people who are leading the district at that point in time. So just some thoughts, or just some possible solutions, I guess, or thoughts on possible solutions.
Is Article 3 a very long article?
No.
Can you start reading from the top or aloud?
Well, I don't think you want me to read the whole thing, I think.
No, just
As
the
much
top.
as
How's it?
everyone likes listening to
It's
the
not
general.
that long, but it's probably too long to just read out loud.
What does the first sentence say?
It's the recognition of NEASM as the sole representative of our professional employees. And then there's other things about due collections and use of our buildings. And I think recognition of management rights.
Any violation of this? What's the line that says any violation?
There's not. That is what I'm understanding is practice, but there's no limitation in our grievance procedure for the association as a party, what their definition of a grievance is or what topic.
What is the first paragraph of your grievance procedure?
The first paragraph right now defines terms and conditions, which is maybe not the best term for our grievance procedure. So the first section of our grievance procedure is a definitional section. The second is about the purpose.
Okay, what's the definitional section?
The definitional section first defines a grievance by a professional employee, and then it defines a grievance by the association to be a claim that its rights provided under this agreement have been violated. And Kevin Scarrow
it does narrow the grievance procedure to the employee or the association, not the parties.
But the board does not have a right under that section.
Under that language, okay.
Yeah. And then it defines days and the superintendent, and then carves out matters that grievances can't be filed under, like supplemental contracts and just as the order thing, I saw a lot of districts had the purpose of the grievance procedure at the front of it, and I kind of liked that to set the tone for use of the grievance procedure. But our purpose is paragraph 2. Paragraph 3 is sort of specifics about the timeline and how to file a grievance, and then paragraph 4 is actually the procedure, the different levels.
Yeah, in private sector contracts, it usually says the parties may file a grievance for for violations of this agreement. Then usually the parties don't use it, usually the union does it. Guys, does it feel like people need a break?
Yeah, we can take a,
10 minutes?
we have not really taken a break yet, except for a short,
It's 10 till 11. You want to come back at 11 or 5 after?
yeah, 11 o'clock sounds
Okay.
good.
Is that good, everyone?
Yeah.
Is everybody here? Are we waiting on Stephanie?
It doesn't look like she's on. Like she's not on the Ring Central.
That's perfect.
Does that mean she needs to be let in?
Oh. Would you have to let her in? I don't know, is there somebody?
When we close this out here. How do I let her in? Do you know how to let her in?
So do we want to start Wednesday morning then? Everybody meeting with their groups and then, you know, take hour or so, whatever. And then get back together to do compensation.
So maybe actually start the meeting at like a different time, like have the meeting start at 10 or something. Because we don't want people like, we don't want to start the official meeting. Like I'd hate for it just to be like blank video for an hour or whatever while our teams are meeting. So we could have the start time. I mean, do you think an hour is sufficient time for all the teams to meet that morning?
Because I think everybody was pretty close to where, wasn't every group pretty close to being where they wanted to present?
Yeah, I think it would just be potentially reviewing in light of the rebudgeting of the ESSER funds. And then also I think those teams would need to discuss eligibility for the program. And, you know, we had some ideas that Russ shared, but we need to hear the interests of everyone and obviously reach a consensus on that. So I think the teams would need to discuss eligibility for the program as well as payout date. Because, you know, the assumption was, and who knows, we need to hear interest, that a one-time single check would be best for most people, but, you know, there's other options, payouts over time, that sort of thing, right before Christmas. Yeah.
If I'm supposed to let her in, Rachel, will you show me how?
You should get a notice.
I haven't.
Let me text her. If you don't have a notice, then.
She's showing up in your participants tab at the bottom.
Yeah, I didn't see her in there.
Okay. Okay, I just texted her. She says, no wonder I can't get it open, because I told her Joe is now the host. I don't know if we maybe need to start it. Okay, she said, give me 1 minute, she's gonna go through the link again, so you might get a pop-up here soon.
Okay.
I feel like we need to have like some really good wait music for whenever we're waiting on anyone to come. Like the customer service hold music. There we go.
Yeah, it was saying I'm entering with limited functional capabilities. I don't know why it did that. Okay, can you guys hear and see me? Did somebody have to admit me?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, I think we're good. All right. I don't know if anybody had a chance to either talk on break or sort of think a little through, or just to kind of reflect on the conversation. I thought coming back on it might be helpful to go back and really tune in on interest again, to really identify where each one of these 3 ideas would meet, which interests they would meet, without harming another. Or do they meet the interest? Do people sort of still have the brain power to go ahead and do that if we look back on Lindsay's list? Or were there any other thoughts you guys had on break?
No, I don't think so. I think it kind of would be helpful to go through each one of those possible solutions as against the interests and see where we are as a team, and see if, what the team thinks about any updates to the grievance procedure to incorporate any of those solutions.
Lindsay, do you want to go ahead and share it? Thank you. And the ones that are in green are the ones that, the new ones today, or are they sort of furthering, hashing out the ones above?
No, they're new ones from today.
Do we want to review them all, you think, or just really the ones today? I don't know if there was something prior that maybe would have been something that might fill in interest. Let's go back to the interest again. Now, guys, final stop being a neutral party as one interest. We would typically see that as sort of a line in the sand, like here's what we won't do, is remove the neutral party. When we talked it out, it's because, right or wrong, last time it felt as though it was a standard or a value that impacted more than just any one grievance not being able to be arbitrated. But, you know, you can challenge yourselves or each other on, is that an interest or is that a position, right? We usually say interest or never positions. When it sometimes comes to core values, I was with a large contractor in a labor union last week, and the contractor felt they just could not move on something. And they literally quoted the large contractor's core value statement, right? I don't know that this is this extreme or formal, but it certainly came through strongly. So you can challenge yourselves on each other. Is that, you know, keeping a neutral party, is that a position or an interest? Right now we have it under an interest. An efficient process, I think everyone thought that was important. I think when you talked about that as an interest, there weren't major examples of, you know, where the process is not efficient or drawn out, other than Rachel and others spoke about the inability to get arbitrators, right? So I think when you get down to your solutions, that is probably going to be, you know, if you were to maintain arbitration and have better ways to get arbitrators, that may address some of the efficiency issues. Were there efficiency issues at the lower level?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And then board involvement in the process without drawing it out. This interest maybe goes more to the ideas that Rachel raised today, at least two of them. You know, it says for local control and recognize that they are elected governing body for decision making. You know, the conversation has circled around Linda. I think she's really stating her experience. Is that the local control is even more local when it's the superintendent and the leaders of the district along with the association. And that works. And then the board is just, you know, wanting acknowledgement here. Are there other ways to do it? I don't know, that they are the governing body. The next interest, resolve issues at lowest possible level. You all say you want to do that. There is a desire to maybe memorialize the spirit of that, because you all won't always be the players. At some point, people are going to move on, people are going to retire. The question was, you know, is it even necessary to put it in the contract because it already happens? Well, maybe that discussion is, you know, does it show that the parties really embrace it and mean it if they put it in the contract? And does it help when you all are gone? I don't know. Adherence and accountability to P&A. I don't know what that one was.
I don't know either.
I mean, I think it's an employee's way of making sure that we at all adhere to the P&A and the, including the.
Oh, just the basic
bosses.
concept of the grievance procedure is about being true, you know, holding the contract real. Okay. I think, right? Is that what you're saying? That, you know, that everybody follows the contract?
Right.
Okay. Uphold protections that were fought for. That goes back to, I think that came up when you guys were talking about the possibility of not having arbitration. That was bigger than you all, that it was one of the things that, you know, were so hard to get that it would feel like going backwards. Again, separate than whether or not you can grieve a particular grievance all the way to arbitration. There was a larger value assigned to that, right or wrong. There was a value assigned to the concept of arbitration. And then this one goes again to the interest that Rachel's now brought ideas forward about, right? Mechanisms for the district to address concerns without filing prohibited practices. And a couple of the solutions we're going to get down to that Rachel was talking about earlier, the board is seeing that, perhaps the grievance procedure is that mechanism. You guys are still talking about that. There are always more than one solution to a problem. And then again, this last one that's highlighted, not go backwards on the grievance standards. Again, that's another sort of value statement or more of a position versus interest. Process seems to have served the parties well, not fix what isn't broken. I think that's kind of framing and focusing, but to not fix in what isn't broken, I guess has been put here as an interest, but point well taken. Equity in the contract goes back to the contract belongs to the parties, but only one party can, utilize the grievance procedure. And then the last interest is having a ratifiable contract, the association sort of flagging, when you guys get to picking solutions, it can really only be a solution if it's something that, that you can get ratified. We've always said, we don't say that lightly, right? Every time, we don't like something, that's not our out, but it sounds as though in this case, the association saying it's a critical part of our contract. So on solutions, add school board as another step in the process. That was one. Make school board the final step, and that's, I think, in place of arbitration. Evaluate the pool of arbitrators, review the list or pool annually, and then we added that, FMCS has arbitrators you can use. Kansas Federal Court has a list that might, let you to more readily get an arbitrator when needed. The question, I guess, is do you want to memorialize those other options in your contract? The next one is set the process for the district to address concerns with association prior to filing prohibitive practices. And the next one is where, I think it's the third green bullet goes with that, right? Rachel, set a process for the district to address concerns prior to filing prohibitive practice. Then the third green bullet down the way you would do that is clarify the ability of the association to file a grievance, but it would only be under Article 3. And then the two I kind of skipped over. One is, define that a grievance doesn't have to be just a violation. It can be a misrepresentation or misunderstanding. And I heard Linda say, and it sounds as though your practice is, maybe Linda didn't say it. I asked Rachel, I said, well, don't people currently file if there is a misunderstanding, a misreading, or a misinterpretation? And I think you guys said yes. So it sounds as though the practice is people are filing for misunderstandings and misinterpretations. But the fact that the word of violations is there seemed harsh. I'm using, my own words. I think you were saying in light of our relationship and how it feels when you get hit with a grievance, violation sounds as though maybe there was an intent for someone to violate. Do you lose anything by just saying, the grievances, possible violations, misinterpretations, or misunderstandings softens the language to the ears, but probably doesn't change the lawful application. So there was that idea. And then a pre-step, do you want to build that? The first step is informal. Do you want to build that into your contract? It's happening now. There's probably no building rep that doesn't go talk to a principal before the grievance is filed, or even others, beyond the principal. So, but the question is, do you add it to your contract? Again, goes back to, showing the collaboration in the agreement that matches in practice. And when you all are gone, do you want to encourage that culture? So that's what you've got out there. And maybe that triggers other or different ideas on how to address most of your interest without harming others. I'm going to be quiet for a little bit. I'm having a little bit of a cough coming up.
No, I think that was
What do you guys think?
I think that was a helpful summary. I mean,
is there anything under solutions that you guys know probably you're not going to head towards, or anything that you know that are easily done, as in expanding the list of arbitrators? I mean, is there anything that's either, yes, that's a no-brainer, or is there anything that doubt we're going to get there, or you want to keep talking?
I don't think we're going to get there with the school board being the final step in the process.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think we can probably agree to evaluate the pool of arbitrators annually.
Okay. Evaluate annually?
Well, that's what it says.
Oh, okay. In terms of possible pools, I think it makes sense, and it's totally up to you guys, and maybe you guys want to, take some time to think about it, but to look at those lists I have there, Kansas Federal Court list and FMCS, we could include both, we could include one, I always like options, but right now, I believe each party gets to pick 10, which is quite a lot, right? We could even go down to 5 potentially to make that process a lot quicker, the elimination process. But you need, if we're gonna keep it at 10, how it's been, you need options, to pick from.
I would say we keep both lists and let's see how
Okay.
the next year goes, and we can reevaluate if we have to
Okay,
shorten that number.
So the Kansas Federal Courts list and the SMCS list?
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
It might be nice to add language that if either side in the future has a suggestion for another list, that
yeah,
we can entertain that.
okay. And I think that language is in there, if I look at it. I think it says, or a mutually agreed upon list, I think is what it says.
I think it does too.
The problem goes back to attorneys, as Linda referenced earlier, they never agree. So, I don't know, but it may be that there's, a list that makes more sense or something, so I like keeping that in there. Okay.
Guys, what about that idea of, do you not currently have language that says, the beginning of your first step language doesn't say something like, if not resolved informally? There's no indication at all prior to first step that conversations happen?
I don't think it's clear that that's what someone should do. It sounds like that is always what happens in practice.
Yeah, that's part of the general provisions.
Yeah, there's a part that says, nothing precludes anyone from trying to resolve it informally first.
How do you feel about taking that out and instead making it like a level 1? Without a real specifics, I think we could do that without saying within so many days, and then you must do that, just building that in as, hey, your first step is the conversation.
Then you're initiating the grievance policy even when you're at the discussion level.
And would it make people have to have a discussion? Are you wanting to encourage it or require it, guys?
I could go either way.
Your
I don't
language
think the
doesn't
current
encourage-
language even encourages it. I think
Yeah,
it
I was
says you
gonna say, the current language
you
sounds
can
like,
if you
yeah.
want. And I think our procedure talks about, the goal of this is to resolve things informally, but, by informally, it means, before an arbitration, I think. So,
I have to wonder if we're fixing something that's not broken, to create extra layers of, who has to have that discussion? Because right now, that discussion happens a lot with the building rep and the principal. So are you saying the individual has to go in and have that conversation with the principal? I think that's going to limit people doing that, because a very large majority of people do not feel comfortable having that kind of labor management conversation with their principal, because that person is the person they report to and makes decisions about what grade level they'll teach, who will be in the building. And you can tell them all the time that, that's their right to do it, but I think it limits the ability of people's concerns.
So I think to answer Stephanie's question, we would want to encourage and not require.
and I think that we
And
could.
like you said, we wouldn't have to encourage the specific person. It could be a building rep going
Yeah.
with them. Because that's one of the things I think you and I usually tell people anyway. Have you talked to this with a building rep? Have you talked about this with your principal? Like, we always ask them that.
I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, in times I've worked with building reps or with Linda directly, we sing out of the same, book. We always ask, have you spoken to your principal? Would you like to be,
Okay.
us to be a part of that? But to require it, maybe that's a bridge too far right now.
Well, and that might also, like, I may go talk to my principal about an issue, and it's just, we're gonna talk about it, and I'm not really trying to initiate the grievance procedure. I just wanna try to problem solve, and I think that then you're kind of muddling the two, if it's required.
Under the purpose.
Well, read the first paragraph again. It may be just a matter of you guys just changing the spirit of the first line that Lindsay read. The first line that Lindsay read sounded like it didn't discourage, but it definitely didn't encourage working things out. What did it say again, Lindsay?
Let me find
Can
it.
you bring that up so we can even see where that is that you're talking about?
I think what Rachel's idea, it really feels to me like it is you all's style. It is you all's preferred way of doing things. It's how you do things. Like nobody here seems like you're just grievance happy, right? There are locals and there are, cultures and unions that are just grievance happy, literally have a log of 200 grievances at any given time. That is not you all's culture. So I hear what Linda's saying on one hand, like it seems unnecessary. On the other hand, is it a good thing to start to let your culture show in the subtleties of your contract without it being a requirement or an additional step? Could you, not advising, but could you just, somehow relay the spirit of your culture in that first sentence before the first step?
What if we moved the purpose statement to the top of the procedure and included a statement in there that, informal conferencing is encouraged?
Like
Yeah,
that.
because you mentioned that earlier about having the purpose being the first paragraph under the article as opposed to the terms and conditions. I mean, that's kind of a rearranging of things.
Say conference though, then it gets into who comes, who's in the room, who calls it, blah, 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 do I have representation? So you said informal conference, could it be informal resolution is encouraged? Or, I don't know. I'm just brainstorming along with you, but yeah, I think maybe share it. Linda had asked, Lindsay, can you share
What about
it?
informal conversation?
I have it pulled up now. Let me do-
I have it.
Okay,
I just was-
cool.
I was
Yeah.
trying to do it quickly. So, right here, right before we get to the procedure, it says, nothing in this article shall preclude a professional employee from discussing a grievance with their principal or immediate supervisor in an effort to informally resolve a grievance.
Yeah, I think it would be better, because that says, to me, that's like you could do this if you wanted to. I think it would be better to take that out, to put the purpose at the top, and to include a statement that encourages. But I am totally comfortable with not making it a precursor, or like a step that you have to complete. So that if there is someone who, whatever the reason is, they can't have that conversation. And maybe then that's language that helps, the Dr. Schumachers and the Linda Seeks as our district goes forward reference, right? Like, you don't have to do it, but this is the setup for our procedure. Have you done it? Do you think you can? And then maybe if there's a good reason why not.
That's encouraging, but this just encourages the employee only, kind of what Jill was saying, like, and building reps sometimes do it. The grievance is not filed because the building rep is handling the issue probably more times than not. And they just sort of know that without looking at their contract to tell them to go problem solve, right? But this number I does just talk about the employee. Is it anyone?
I think it would make sense to leave this in there, and then, if we added something else as like an informal above, because it may just be that the building rep brings it up, saying, hey, I'm hearing there's an issue going on. I'm letting you know there's some concerns about it potentially being grievable. What can we do to fix it? And maybe the employee wouldn't specifically go in and talk to the principal at all because the building reps already tried to address it.
Would you scroll up to the top of this page, Lindsay?
You can scroll
Or
to purpose.
the heading, yeah.
This part right here?
Yeah, I just wanted to go to the very top. It was titled something weird, I thought.
General
There.
provisions.
No, purpose. Yeah, let's look at purpose. Because Rachel, were you saying either move that sentence or build something there?
Yeah. To me, I thought it was odd that like the purpose statement was in the middle of the procedure. And I think with what we're talking about, I can envision language that's at the top as like a setup to the procedure. And then if we don't, if we're thinking that making it a step isn't a good solution, at the outset saying, an encouraging type statement. And we could say, a professional employee or their building rep on behalf of an employee, if that helps. And that's what actually happens.
Because the purpose kind of also.
That's a good purpose statement.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
it.
But I agree, it gets bedded in. There's not much tweaking to that purpose statement to kind of recognize that, a professional employee and or their building rep are encouraged to have dialogue, problem-solving dialogue without filing a grievance if it makes sense. Whatever, you don't want to use that word, but. Okay, you guys are kind of heading in the direction what you want to do with this. I'm going to go on mute for a second and get a bottle of water. Keep going. And just in terms of time check, what time check is it? It's 11:36.
Yeah.
That first sentence talks about free, easy, and effective communication between professional employees and the administrative staff is a mutually important objective.
So what if we just added something like, parties are encouraged to have an informal conversation in an effort to resolve a issue prior to filing a grievance. But don't make it like a step in the process.
Right.
I'm happy to draft something that shows like moving that purpose statement up and including an encouraging phrase. How do we feel about expanding the definition so it's not just a violation, but to include violation, misapplication, misinterpretation?
Where's that?
So throughout, like.
Couldn't it be this terms and conditions number one?
So like a grievance is a violation of the P&A, to say violation, misinterpretation, or misapplication.
Yeah,
Again,
that's how we kind of, that's how we see it now.
It's current practice.
It's adding.
Okay. And I don't know that there's any other low-hanging fruit on our solution list before Stephanie comes back.
I'm here, I'm listening to you, I didn't go far.
No, I just didn't want to, we talked about looking at, so far, what we've kind of circled around for a solution is, changing the list of arbitrators, so instead of it being the AAA or the National American Academy, we have the Kansas Federal Courts and the FMCS.
And we want to keep the language correct where it's any other party that
Yes,
we can mutually agree on.
yes.
So we
keep that.
don't get stuck in the same thing of those lists
Yeah,
not giving us enough choices.
not being sufficient or not having available arbitrators, I think that's a good idea. So that was number one. Number two was moving the purpose language that we already have to the front and including a brief statement encouraging an informal conversation. And I think that could happen between who's ever appropriate, building rep, and principal, whoever makes sense. And then number 3, expanding the definition so that it's not just a violation, but also just a concern about a misinterpretation or misapplication. I think that doesn't, again, that's how it's been used, but again, I think it can help take out heat in the way that maybe a grievance is written or a grievance is explained. To say, I think that you are misinterpreting. I think that you are misimplying. I don't think that's what that language means, as opposed to you have committed a serious wrong, and violated something. Now, that language may be used, certainly, and may be appropriate in some cases. I think we leave the violation language, but I like having that other language there. Because sometimes, a decision by, a principal or something was not, it goes to, I like Stephanie's comment of like intent. Sometimes it wasn't intentional. Sometimes it was, that's how I read it, or that's what I thought.
Or maybe they hadn't fully read it.
Right. Or I just didn't know. Okay, so where's our list up there? Okay.
And I'm guessing some of those issues where I just didn't know, those probably do get resolved informally. I think the language is fine, but it's a good thing, right? To be able to have those informal conversations so that whatever redirect needs to happen with the violating party, if you will, gets done, verbally by someone in their building. So everybody would rather be given the heads up and do corrective course than get a grievance, for sure. While you're doing that, I'm gonna look back on, you're in the language, Lindsay. Oh, no, I can't open when you're done on the language, you're on that document. I'm sorry, I stepped away.
I'm back on our notes.
You're back on notes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So,
Do you want me to pull the agreement back up?
no, that's okay. That's what I wanted to be on, was notes. So Linda and Jill both felt like, adding the board as, adding the board as another step was going to be the final step. They said they felt like it was not a place you guys were going to get. How are other people feeling about taking that off the list at this point? Or are we there yet, or no? And with, I'm sorry, my mom and my brother just walked in. I didn't give them heads up. I'm still in a meeting till noon, guys. Do you feel like these other things do move you guys forward in terms of most of the interest? Or are we still sort of, and if you just expanded the arbitration list, I'm guessing you're not going to continue to talk about making the board the final step. So can that be struck off?
I will tell you, this is a pretty important issue for the board and has been. I think that I think that they can come to an agreement and to something ratifiable if they feel like they have the same rights to access the outside arbitrator that the association does, and that there's at least some equity in the contract.
I have a hard time not agreeing to this till I see what that process looks like. Because I think that process exists. Like I say, I would think that for that to happen, there needs to be dialogue with the representative, with the board. Otherwise, we've been doing this forever. If it's the superintendent, I don't know where the board's voice is. And I would really like to hear instances of where they think they should have had the opportunity to file a grievance against us. So I really struggle with that. I don't even know how in the concept of this, we're going to set a process for that. That would be memorialized in language.
So I don't want to get confrontational and try and list instances.
If I could see that, and I'm just saying,
Yeah.
At this point, I'm not there because it's too general.
So again, the process existing, it has existed for the association and does not exist for the board. The board does not have the same rights as the association does to access an arbitrator to interpret our agreement. What I would envision is that, most commonly, this process is used by an individual professional employee, most commonly what I would envision is that we set in the procedure what the process is for the board or the association, right? And so stays the same, it would just basically require under each of those, well, not under arbitration, but under levels 1 and 2, there is a process set out for the board and the association to use. And if we want, we define that specifically now going forward to include only grievances regarding Article 3. And then again, potentially, the board was interested in having a process memorialized in here that is the discussion that we have if we're concerned about a prohibited practice. I don't know if the association has that same, yes, we'd also like to do that before filing a prohibited practice, but it could go both ways.
I don't know where we go when we're not interested in that. I know the board hasn't, we weren't really interested in making any changes to the grievance policy, but we've listened and gone. I don't know where we go, Stephanie, if we're not interested in that.
I don't know. I think that a couple of things. Number one, remember when I sort of flagged that it comes down to people holding on to sort of core values or, and tradition, and there's nothing wrong with that because there's also a lot of strength in being able to have an outside arbitrator in your third step. But that said, I would say, in the IBB model, your solutions are looking to match an interest. I think that there's a sort of a failure of this group to dig down and really find a strong interest that would directly be solved by removing arbitration. And that's why I think you're helping that, right? There's not anything that is really inspiring or pressing or, having this whole group say, yes, I clearly see this is a problem. It's a problem we're going to continue to have. It's a problem we deal with. Here's what's going on. Here's the examples. And so while we hate to bite the bullet and change this, we're going to. I do have faith and hope that this whole group, association included, would make some hard choices if it was a hard choice that resulted in fixing a real hard problem. And I think we've failed to really dig back and say, what is the real hard problem? And while, Linda, I'm going to encourage you to not say we, because on this board, there is really no chief spokesperson, right? And I want everyone to speak for themselves, right? But what I'm saying with that is, yes, you're right. You're saying, I don't know what you hear about, we don't want to. Well, I think we shouldn't say we, because there may be times on this board where someone is not we, the association.
Agreed. But we're not
Right,
hearing
and I'm
from
not
anybody in the
correcting
room except for
Yeah,
Rachel and I,
no,
including the board
got you.
side.
And yeah, but you didn't know where to go with it. So you sort of asked, so I'm just giving you my off-the-cuff perception. And this is a hard one. This is where a group that really does well in terms of collaboration, in terms of joint problem solving, in terms of respecting each other's interests. You all have come to something that feels awkward and different than what you've been doing. And I think the reason you're not getting anywhere on just, like when you say, we're just not interested, is because I think that we haven't fully fleshed out. That's all I'm saying. And I don't mean to correct you guys. It's just coaching as your facilitator. Just be careful when we fall back to those traditional patterns.
Are you saying
when
we
one
haven't
person
fleshed
sort of
out
speaks,
the
for
problem?
all.
You're saying we failed in fleshing out like an actual problem?
Actually, perhaps, right? There's an interest there, but it could be and I'm going to give by way of example, if you all were being presented with an example of an arbitration that hurt both parties, that damaged morale, that was a decision that neither one wanted. If you had an arbitration that hadn't been heard for 5 years because you can't get arbitrators, if you guys were showing that, you spent, $500,000 on attorneys through the last 3 years on arbitrations, those are the things that I think I have faith in everyone around this room. You probably would pull away from your values, your core values. You would pull away from this idea that it's the gold standard. And you guys would really, really hash out, hey, what's going on here, right? But that's what I'm saying. It's like, I think you guys haven't either hashed it out enough, or it's just not a burning enough problem for you all to really figure out a solution that would be as severe as giving up your arbitration process. That's kind of what I'm observing, But in the mix of that, in other situations, you may end up, the district and the association may move on what you perceive as core values around an issue someday, may not be this one, maybe another one. If the problem is urgent enough, if it's a joint problem that's crystal clear, and the only solution you have is to make big shifts on what you perceive as your own core values. And I just don't think you have a big enough problem being laid out in front of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I agree that we would not want to get rid of the arbitration step, but I think also Rachel was saying that you were okay with that as well? Like,
I mean, it's going to be, I think, an uphill battle. I think the board was really, there was some concern that our procedure wasn't really effective, at least that there's no effective avenue, you know, for the board, and things took a really long time. There's a lot of attorney's fees. So yeah, I mean, their concern was sort of around an effective procedure. It'll be, you know, it will be somewhat of an uphill battle. You know, like Stephanie always says, you have to sell this to your party. You have to sell why the team reached a certain solution. So I'm going to have to sell.
I think we need to hear examples. I don't think we have heard examples. I think it's very generalization to say there's been tons of money in fees, there's been delays in the process. Give us some examples of what this problem is. We have had, in the last 6 years, we've had a prohibitive practice filed against the board for issuing a 3-year unilateral contract, and we've had a prohibited practice in a specific instance with an elementary school, which was resolved without going to arbitration. And if the truth be told, if there are significant delays, it was the board's, not you, but the other attorney representing the board that had constant delays, and we can show that. So I think when we did settle the prohibited practice, it was the board reaching out to the superintendent, who reached out to me as the leader of the organization to say, can we do mediation? And we did. So in addition to, what other examples are there besides those two? Because they would have to be non-member issues, because those are the only ones that have happened in my 6 going on 7 years here.
Okay, so I just want to say at the outset that I'm having a little bit of trouble with this conversation, because I feel like what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm not, is that we're happy with the way the procedure is working, and it's been that way for a long time. And even though we're in negotiations to look at contract language, if something's been away for a while, we're not willing to have a discussion about changing it, which is, to me, the whole purpose of negotiations and meeting annually. But also, I think it's sort of not giving recognition that the board sees this as a problem. And I feel like that's a challenge to all of us at this table. When someone identifies an issue, to me, that's always the oddest part of IBB, is that whether it's a present and everyday issue for the board and the administration or not, we have to be here and be present and accept that it's a problem for our professional employees. And so I feel like on the issues that you've brought forward, we've accepted that that is an issue for you, and not basically said, well, you need to come forward with specific data or proof.
Sure, and we had discussions, but we never put things in.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any language about, everything is we're going to trust that the procedure will take place for the next year. So we have a collective commitment, but we have nothing that goes into the contract that recognizes that. And I just don't see this, I don't think you've brought the problem then hasn't been fleshed out to see where this is a overwhelming problem that we don't just watch and see what happens, because that's what we're doing with all of our issues. We're going to collectively see if we can change them over time, but no language.
So, and again, and some of that stuff we talked about on the onset, may be confidential, but it may be confidential where at least maybe, Rachel and Jill can talk. And there may not be a whole lot more, right? But I do want to hear how other people are feeling at this point. We're down to about 7 minutes. I feel like a little bit, those of us that really lean in, we've been talking a lot. When I want to get us back to making sure that, we have a broad committee that's weighing in here. Everyone sort of has equal footing to have an opinion. I know there are folks in the room that, have experiences that they can share at certain levels or engagement in the grievance procedure, or just in their building, or just what they're thinking about the whole conversation here. So let's hear a little bit more from the folks that have not weighed in, if we could.
I,
And then let's think about where we go from here, because we still have Wednesday.
I think I'm, I guess, confused because it seems like the solution we're getting down to having an issue about is the board being able to file a grievance against the association. Is kind of like where we're getting stuck, because I'm hearing potentially like not making the board the final step could be acceptable if, you know, they have the ability. But if we're looking at the problem statement is how do we make the grievance procedure more efficient and effective? So we're like, that doesn't even relate to what we're saying the problem is. So I guess that's my confusion is we've
board
now
doesn't feel-
spun totally off into something.
The board does not feel like there's an effective, because it doesn't have the control that other, like, for other Kansas school districts, they are the final arbitrator. They are the, deciding body on grievances. And so they don't feel like it's effective because it doesn't give them any access to the process whatsoever.
So if they had something similar to what the association had with regards to Article 3, that would be something that they would be wanting?
Yes. So that the same access that the association has, the board has, and again, potentially, and I only see this as being helpful to the association, is to also say that it could be used prior to filing a prohibited practice, again, to try and get to that lowest level. I think that'd be helpful for all, but, we could have a discussion around that.
Who else has not sort of weighed in? Lindsay, thank you for leaning forward and say where your mind's going and sort of where you're hung up a little bit. I hope that's helpful. Who else wants to weigh in here? What else is everyone thinking? It's really important in IBB that everybody weigh in. When things start to feel a little bit like conflict, some people lean back and we revert to that traditional chief negotiator mode, which I'd prefer not, right? You're going to have the best outcome here if everyone wins in. Doesn't mean you have to make a decision today, but tell us what you're stuck on, where you're at, what you're thinking right now.
I'm
Who
on
else?
the equity piece as well, where if it's good for one party, it should be good for the other party as far as the grievance process. That's where my thought process is.
As a building rep this last year, that's the first thing I've always done, though, is go straight to my principal, either by myself, if someone's brought something to me, or go with, if I needed to go with another staff member. So that part that we were stuck on for so long with the, just communicating with your principal the problem before you do anything.
You're saying you already, that you
Yeah,
feel like that's already in place?
For me at least, as a building rep.
I think it's in place in most places, and I think it's the best way to resolve the problems, and I'd say the vast majority of them are solved at that level. And I would agree with what Scott said and what Rachel said with, I think the board is asking for the same access as, as the others, as both sides, both just equal access.
And I think and then I think maybe this is something that is helpful for Rachel, others, everyone, think over tonight. When you talk about the board's asking for the same access, it's clearly a procedure that has worked, right? But I think people are struggling with, like, by way of example, I gave the only one I know that wasn't really even related to y'all's industry or your contract. So maybe that kind of thinking coming forward Wednesday would be helpful. Who else can say a little bit about where you're at on this before we wrap up?
I guess I would just be curious as to why there would be so much, like, I don't know if concern is the right word, about, like, this, a lot of people have spoken to the value, how we value this contract, so why we couldn't, all parties, it feels like, should be able to bring up concerns regarding the contract if we really know how hard people fought to make this what it is.
I think for me, it's when we respect that everyone has concerns that they want to bring up, but if we bring up a concern, we're saying, like, this is the problem. These are what the teachers are saying is the problem, and giving specific examples, and I don't think anyone's saying that we disagree that the board feels like this is a problem. We just can't even like wrap our heads around like when it's a problem, you know, and also like we're the representatives of the association, so it also feels a little bit like the board is saying you guys are doing it wrong. You know, so that, I think that also.
It's kind of a catch-22, isn't it? Like, that's how I feel like I'm in. I feel like I'm in a catch-22. I don't think it's going to be healthy for our relationship, and most of this would be privileged anyway, for me to like go through and list specific situations. That's not going to be healthy. And again, I don't want to create the impression that there has been like this vast number or whatever. I think the board overall, there's just been situations which have made them feel like they don't have access to a grievance procedure. I really am hesitant, and I can't in most cases go through specific things, and I want to state it both ways. Overall, I mean, I think we have a very good relationship with our association and with our teachers. It's not a common thing, and it's not common going back against the administration or the board either. But I don't want to create a pressure from this that the board thinks that there's an issue. They just feel like the grievance procedure is not effective for all issues, meaning issues that they as the other party may have to this. And so I don't want to get caught in that catch-22, and I don't want to do anything or throw out situations that either can't because they're privileged or that are only going to, harm the relationship or be awkward.
And you know, guys, I feel like, in my mind, I'm like, gosh, you guys have done so good. You're like coming down to the finish line on the contract. I think you're going to get over hurdles on salary. This is sort of, it's not derailing your whole process. It's not derailing your relationship. I think your relationship is strong enough, if you stay true to this process, that you can have these hard kind of conversations. But, but do stay in it. Remember, when we talk about when conflict happens, parties start to assume bad intentions. They start to assume the worst. They start to assign someone's opinion on something to that person. So those are just reminders that as you work through these last 2 days, guys, keep those things at the forefront. It's just going through a hard process. So continue to sort of honor each other's area, where you stand right now. No one's in a good position on this right now. And I want to back up. I feel like I'm always sort of correcting, and I don't want to be a wordsmith. I said, Linda, don't use we. I don't want to be disrespectful and correct. I mean, sometimes I tell people, remember, it's an idea, not a proposal. So that's all the nature of my redirect is. Linda, seriously. I wanted to make sure it didn't start. It easily can be. Your sort of most experienced, strongest leader in the room could start really stepping forward, and therefore people very easily sit back in the observer role, right? And that chief negotiator, speaks on behalf of everyone. And I think Linda probably does have a read of the folks that she knows in the room around this. But I wanted to make sure that you guys don't stop participating, because there are strong personalities with a lot of experience in the room, thank goodness, but we need everyone. So that's why I sort of wanted to see, where else is your head on this? What are you thinking? It is 12 noon, guys. If there's anyone that really wants to jump in here, say any sort of last final for today words on this. And then I think that when we get together Wednesday, shall we go ahead and pick up this conversation? Because you do have some low-hanging fruit I think you probably have consensus on. I don't want to do raising hands yet while those other things are still sort of on the list. So I think this comes back to us on Wednesday. Would you say?
Because Wednesday is our last session.
Yes, and you've got to do salary breakouts.
Would the team feel comfortable with me doing a document that's our grievance procedure that includes some of these things we've talked about, moving the purpose up to the front, adding misinterpretation or misapplication, changing out the arbitrators, and then knowing that we don't have a consensus at all on this, showing what it would look like if the board had the same right as the association to file a grievance for us to look at. I know we don't have a consensus on that, but I also, I think it's very possible for us to have Wednesday at our last meeting, so I don't want to throw that off because there's not enough time to do any possible drafting work. It's always easier to delete than it is for me to draft, and I don't want to be in a time crunch.
So I want to ask the question for that. When you say the board wants this process to grieve, do you see the process then of the board actually interacting with the association?
Potentially, it would probably be the superintendent on behalf of the board or the board president. And again, I hear you saying that's already happening, we're already doing that, but at the end of the day, there's no access to the arbitration process for interpretation of the agreement. So if,
Right, and you know, what's usually, yeah, I mean, usually, I mean, when I say, you know, it's usually the union utilizing the grievance procedure, even if the company or the organization has the right to, it's usually because the company or the organization is the group that has the authority to change something or resolve something, right? So that just seems as though people are struggling with the idea of, if the board filed a grievance, how would the union remedy a board's grievance when the board really has authority on most things, the ability to set things, to change things, like, right? So I guess that's where the best you can do, Rachel, for people to either get past this, at least to understand it, and then say, hey, does it help meet the interest to do that, is to try to get as close as you can to an example that may not even be in the realm of your thinking, but something that you can come up with. Because I think people are just struggling with what's this about, and so it's creating some trust a little bit. You know, I heard Lindsay say it just feels like, you know, we're being told, or that, you know, we're not doing our job, or however she did it. In other words, people are starting to question intent, and the board's not in the room. And I don't think they're questioning you, Rachel. They're just trying to put the pieces together on what's the board trying to do here. So it's just the more specific you can be, the better. I would also say, I know that you all need to do all of your negotiations publicly. And there are things, I know, Rachel, you wouldn't want to share that are related to individual employees. But maybe you and Rachel do a 10-minute phone call that might help you relay a couple of key things that Rachel could let her committee know in private that are forming some of this desire, you know, so, or this idea, you know, whatever, if that makes sense, so that maybe you have a little better understanding on when, we all have a little better understanding on Wednesday, when you pick it up again. Make sense? Okay. If salary teams want to meet this afternoon, help yourself. I know Jay won't be able to meet with his team. So therefore, when we're together on Wednesday, let's start the day knowing you're going to do some teamwork, maybe significant time in your teams before you come back and present to each other.
So do we want to meet as compensation teams, like from 9 to 10, and then start as a whole group at 10?
Sounds good.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
I mean, that sounds okay to me.
Now, if you guys are going to do compensation teams, you're all going to be in person, so I shouldn't open the link until 10 on Wednesday?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Okay. All right, guys. You're going to do fine. You're tough. Tough work for tough people. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.